Americans. And then she finally says, just a suggestion to get you out of your mind frame of being a victim. I feel sorry for you. Now, she uses the word victim. Well, I am not a victim. As I said, I have been and remain successful. But there are too many of our people who are not successful. And there are too many of our people who today are still victims of whiteism. The 9-year-old boy in Brooklyn with that Ashkenazian woman, the so-called Jewish woman, who attacked him and falsely claimed that he touched her ass. That's right. That pale-skinned woman was terrorizing that 9-year-old black boy in New York. Yes, he's a victim of that. Yes. Call it what it is. He's a victim. 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Ohio, gunned down within seconds by a cop. He was a victim. And we can go on and on listing black names who are victims of whiteism, who have been killed, beaten by people who look like you. So you have your white card, Linda. You got your white card. You know, oftentimes people cannot tell and distinguish you from any other white ethnic group. As an Irish woman, they cannot. You have your white privilege. But yet, African Americans are still being attacked in this country. African Americans' progress is still being sabotaged in this country. And you have the nerve to talk about victim? Well, if you and your people and people like you will stop victimizing my people, then my people would have no need to say that, look, or ask the question, why are you killing us? Why are you doing this or that to us? There would be no question about those things, but those questions remain because you're continually doing those things to African Americans in this country. Now, let's go on to this main part here. This main part is going to deal with the New York City draft riots of 1863. That's right, 1863. Well over 100 years ago. And this is going to be based upon an article from Wikipedia about the riots that occurred in 1863, where pale-skinned Irishmen killed and lynched blacks in Lower Manhattan. And you had black businesses in Lower Manhattan. But they ran them out. They ran them off. They killed well over 100 blacks in Manhattan. And this was not the South. This was not the Midwest. It was not Black Wall Street of Oklahoma. It was not Rosewood of Florida. This was New York City in 1863, just when the Civil War was going on in the United States of America. So let's deal with this. The New York draft riots, which occurred between July 13th and July 16th of 1863, known at the time as the Draft Week, were violent disturbances in Lower Manhattan, widely regarded as the culmination of working class discontent with new laws passed by Congress that year to draft men to fight in the ongoing American Civil War. The riots remain the largest civil and racial insurrection in American history. Now that's very, very important. The largest. The largest. And who was the ethnic group, the pale-skinned ethnic group who was behind it? Yes, none other than the Irish. The Irish. Let's remember that. The Irish. But the largest civil unrest in American history. What did they do? Linda talked about being strong like the Irish. Well, what the hell was the Irish doing in 1863 in Lower Manhattan? Oh, yes. They were burning down buildings. They were shooting at and killing police. They were lynching blacks. This is what these people were doing. U.S. President Abraham Lincoln diverted several regiments of militia and volunteer troops from following up after the Battle of Gettysburg to control the city. The rioters were overwhelmingly working-class men, resenting particularly that wealthier men would or could afford to pay a $300 equivalent to $9,157 in 2017 commutation fee. This was a fee that they would pay to hire a substitute, were spared from the draft. In other words, they were getting out of the draft. They were not going to the Civil War. Initially intended to express anger at the draft, the protest turned into a race riot. That's right, a race riot. You know how often things are sabotaged, and it's sabotage to harm and to hurt blacks. This was such a case, and these were the Irish who were doing this in 1863. So a race riot with white rioters, predominantly Irish immigrants. Let me say that again, predominantly Irish immigrants. Remember now, most blacks were already here before most of these Irish even arrived here in America. The Irish, most of them arrived later. Now earlier you had Irish who came as indentured servants. Now indentured servants were people who were temporarily indentured servants, which is another form of slavery, but you had rules, you had laws that regulated that. They could not perpetually be held as indentured servants. However, you had blacks who were held perpetually as slaves here in the United States of America. A very, very telling difference between the Irish and the African Americans. So these Irish immigrants attacking blacks throughout the city. The official death toll was listed at either 119 or 120 individuals, which I think is a very, very low count. Conditions in the city were such that Mayor John E. Wool, commander of the Department of the East, said on July 16th that martial law ought to be proclaimed, but I have not a sufficient force to enforce it. In other words, there was not enough police power there. There was not enough militia power, government troops there to protect these blacks from the rioting of the Irish, the Bill O'Reilly people, the Irish, the Linda Riley people, the Irish. Initially intended to express anger at the draft. Remember, that was what it was all about initially, supposedly. But what did it turn into? It turned into a race riot. They wanted to kill blacks. They wanted to run blacks out of lower Manhattan. They wanted to destroy black economics in lower Manhattan. To this day, black economics has not returned to lower Manhattan. And that story is repeated over and over and over again in cities and towns and counties and states across this country. This is what pale-skinned Americans were doing to sabotage black progress in this country, and they still do. That is why we demand reparations. We demand restitution for what the government has sponsored along with private individuals and enterprise in this country against black people in America. The military did not reach the city until after the first day of the rioting, by which time the mobs, primarily ethnic Irish, again the Irish, had already ransacked or destroyed numerous public buildings. That's right, burning down property. You talk about blacks rioting in their own community, burning down property. Well, hey, look, they didn't have nothing on the Irish. This is what we're doing in 1863 in lower Manhattan. They were burning down and destroying property and killing especially black people in lower Manhattan. But they had already ransacked or destroyed numerous buildings. 2 Protestant churches they had destroyed. And then you got the Irish Catholic, okay? But they had destroyed the Protestant churches. The homes of various abolitionists or sympathizers, those who sympathized with black freedom. They were destroying these people's property. Many black homes they destroyed. And the Colored Orphan Asylum at 44th Street and 5th Avenue, which was burned to the ground. So you see that they had no care for or about what they were destroying. I mean, orphanages, churches, they had no respect for any of that. They were destroying that. They were killing blacks. They were lynching blacks in lower Manhattan, New York. Again, this was not the South. This was right there in the Northeast, in New York City. The area's demographics changed as a result of the riot. In other words, they're running these blacks out of the area, forever changing the demographics of lower Manhattan in New York. And today, that is some of the most wealthiest property in the United States of America. But why is it not that blacks could benefit from that? Why is it that they were pushed out and there was never any restitution or reparations for that? Why? Why? That's the question. Why? That's the question to Linda Riley, an Irish woman, Okay? Some of these pale-skinned women are some of the most dangerous people with regards to blacks in America. Some of the most dangerous. We know what the lying pale-skinned woman said, which caused the brutal, savage death of Emmett Till in 1957. We know about that. And they're still doing these things. They're still lying. The 9-year-old, as I mentioned earlier, the 9-year-old black child, lied upon by this false Jew in Brooklyn, New York. So as I said, the area demographics changed as a result of the riot. Not only that, but the future wealth of blacks changed as a result of that. What if blacks were still living in Lower Manhattan today? What if they were still there? Look at the value of the property in Lower Manhattan today. Look at it. But yet, these pale-skinned people, specifically the Irish, ran blacks out of that area. There was no restitution, as I said. There was no reparation.